So welcome to SpeakEasy. I'm Maureen Muldoon, the founder, spiritual mother of this community. We here at SpeakEasy, we attempt to speak easily about tough and tender topics, about the limitless nature of God and life and love. And we are passionate about supporting new speakers and teachers. And we believe that everyone is our teacher. And this is a community where we sit knee to knee and heart to heart, and where you're invited to take a class or teach a class. And we're committed to making all of our classes throughout the week available, regardless of economic circumstances. Be sure to check out the calendar, and Mari will tell you more about that. Because SpeakEasy is an incubator of awesomeness, where we love making dreams come true, and we love celebrating the very best of who we're capable of being. Today we have Barbara Arrowsmith-Young, and then we'll have a conversation after that. And the conversation is the most important part, because we invite you to speak easily, to find your voice, to find your truth, to share your thoughts, your inspirations, your awareness, your questions. We say don't leave your brains or your beliefs or your backgrounds at the door. We don't have all the answers, but we love the questions. So today we have Linda, who's going to be introducing our speaker. But before we do that, I just wanted to introduce you to Linda. And Linda Vasasky is an amazing teacher of A Course in Miracles. And if you are in the program Miracles Live 365, you're going to want to check her out. She teaches daily at 9:10 Central Time with Amy Anderson. Linda has studied A Course in Miracles for the past 10 years. She's a licensed spiritual practitioner since 2015. And she is one of those people who totally lives her purpose. Her purpose is to connect and empower people. And I have seen her do that over and over and over again in our community. She literally lives from that place of passion and purpose and laughter. And when she teaches, she shares from her life experiences. It just makes the lesson richer and applicable and fun. She's one of those fun teachers. And she has been such an elegant force in our community. If it wasn't for her, we wouldn't have the extra class at 5:45 that I get up for every morning. Thank you, Linda. But she started that. She's the reason that Barbara Arrowsmith-Young is even with us today. And so I'm just really grateful for her incredible impact on our community in such a short time. And I'm just really looking forward to what else she has in store for us. So thank you, Linda. God bless. And I'll pass it to you.
What a blessing that I found this beautiful community a year and a bit ago. And Spirit said yes to following Maureen Muldoon. So I've had a year being trained and mentored by this wonderful woman. And I feel blessed beyond words to step up into leadership with Amy and do the Miracles Live 365 every day. So that being said, let's simply get present to this moment. This sacred moment that will never come again. So let's take a deep cleansing breath together. And if it feels comfortable, please allow your eyes to close. So as we gently marinate in our breath, I feel the presence, the power, the infinite source of this one divine creator that I call God. God is the source of all creation. God is greatness on demand. And I trust and I know that each one of us are divine expressions of the one. Each one of us are here to share our love and our light and our spirit with the world. Each one of us are here on course to share love and light as beacons in the world. And I trust and I know right here, right now, that this service unfolds, this beautiful service in SpeakEasy evolves today with grace, with ease, with laughter, and with joy and with wisdom. I'm grateful for the spiritual leadership of Maureen Muldoon, and for the divine guidance of Beth Gordon, for the board of directors here, for Joni, our tech queen, for Mari, who guides us every week, and for all those that are behind the scenes that make this beautiful service possible today. I'm also grateful to witness this beautiful musician, Michelle, today with us, and also to witness Barbara Arrowsmith-Young, a beautiful, wonderful woman of peace, of power, and that delivers with purpose of her passion in the world. You're in for a treat. So for this and so much more, we are so blessed. So please join me in saying, and so it is. And as we marinate in these thoughts, knowing that God is the source of our supply, I invite us all to simply contemplate for the next minute the joy, the love, the wisdom that is around us at all times, and the knowing that this divine purpose I call God is who and what we are. So let's simply sit back for a minute and then allow the divine energy to speak through us. So I invite us all to simply return back to this beautiful community. And please join me in saying, and so it is. Amen. So Barbara Arrowsmith-Young is the founder of the Arrowsmith Program, an assessment process and a series of cognitive exercises designed to stimulate and strengthen weakened areas of the cognitive function that underlie a range of learning disabilities, which has been delivered for 40 plus years around the world. Her work began in 1978, and she is going to share her own personal journey with you today. So I'll move forward and say her vision is that all students struggling with learning will have the opportunity to benefit from cognitive programs utilizing the principles of neuroplasticity, programs that change the brain's capacity to learn and open to these learners a world of possibilities. The Arrowsmith Program is offered in over 90 educational organizations in 12 countries around the world. Ongoing research with neuroscientists, neuropsychologists, and psychologists is demonstrating that the program not only changes the brain, cognitive functioning, and academic achievement, but also leads to social, emotional well-being. So please give a warm welcome for my friend, my mentor, an extraordinary woman, Barbara Arrowsmith-Young.
Thank you, Linda. That was beautiful. And I'm glad Linda and I have known each other since I think we were just reminiscing 1996. And I'm really glad she didn't put some of the other things in the introduction that that she might have been able to. I just feel so blessed to be here this morning. I feel like already, like I'm taking away so many gifts from just what I've heard, the beautiful music, the concept of incubator of awesomeness, marinate in thoughts, which is actually really quite a profound statement if you think about what marination does, the process to soften and open to allow things in. Anyway, I just thank you already for sharing the richness of who you all are in the world. And I really thank you for inviting me to chat with you this morning. I'm really, really appreciative. And what I would like to do is really take you on a journey of my story. I like to share my story I think probably all of us have been on an airplane before, and when they are giving those safety statements, and they say, if the plane gets into trouble, these lights will come on and guide you on your path. And I feel my whole life those lights have been on, guiding me in my path. And I believe, I say a prayer every morning. May this work go out into the world with ease, grace, and heart integrity. And then I surrender it to the Divine Mother. So I feel like the Divine Mother has been, been guiding me. And sometimes maybe I've stepped on those lights and tried to ignore them, but the guidance is always there. So I feel really excited to be in a very like-minded community. So my story is a story of passion and love. Really how I came to fall in love with the human brain, how I was born with parts of my brain really not working very well, and how my family's belief shaped my determination to do something about my problems. And it was a journey of discovery and hope, and how I set myself on a mission to discover a solution. And even through very, very dark times, I believed there had to be a path out of my suffering. And the journey is both personal and universal. The personal was really my own struggle with very, very significant and crippling learning difficulties. And the universal was I came to realize each person has their own unique cognitive profile of strengths and weaknesses, and that these come to shape who we are and our understanding of the world. And this journey also was a meeting of remarkable people and ideas that illuminated me in my darkness and guided me into the light. And there's a belief in many cultures that if someone saves your life, you owe a life debt to that person. And for me, I owe a life debt, I believe, to two remarkable individuals. They were both scientists. So Alexander Romanovich Luria and Mark Rosenzweig. And if they had not shared their gifts and their insight and brilliance in the world, I would not have been able to build my work. I really stood on the shoulders of genius. And there's a poem that I think represents my journey. And if people know Denise Levertov, it's her poem, Variation on a Theme by Rilke. And she says, a certain day became a presence to me. There it was, confronting me, a sky, air, light, a being. And before it started to descend from the height of noon, it leaned over and struck my shoulder as if with the flat of a sword. The day's blow rang out metallic. Or it was I, a bell awakened, and what I heard was my whole self saying and singing what I knew. I can. So I feel like I was given a life test that shaped my journey. And my life and my work has been an exploration of the territory of the brain and how it makes us uniquely who we are, and how understanding this territory can give us compassionate insight into our functioning and the functioning of others. And what is most promising is that we now know that through the application of the principles of neuroplasticity, which simply means our brain is capable of change, we can make new connections, we can strengthen existing connections, we can actually weaken existing connections, we can grow new neurons, we can change neurotransmitters. Through this process of neuroplasticity, we can fundamentally change the brain's capacity to learn and to function. And this can happen throughout our lifespan. I've worked with children as young as 5 and adults as old as 85. And as I'm getting older, it's very encouraging. My story begins in 1951. I was born in Toronto into a family of an educator and a social activist, my mother, and a scientist and inventor, my father. And I started grade 1 in 1957. And it was then that I discovered something was very wrong. I struggled with learning to read, to write, to understand arithmetic, and to comprehend language. And in grade 1, I heard my teacher speak to my mother and say to her, your daughter has a mental block. She has a defect. And that I would never learn like other children. And to me, the message was very clear. I was told I best learn to live with my limitations. And this was in the 1950s. And the idea was that the brain was fixed. The brain that you're born with is the brain that you're going to die with. There's nothing that you can do if there's a problem in the brain. So I feel like I was given a life sentence in grade 1. So imagine having a brain that's capable and incapable at the same time. This was my experience and is also the experience of most children struggling with learning difficulties. Growing up, I lived in a world that was incredibly confusing and incomprehensible. As I was later to discover, critical parts of my brain were not working properly. And the end result of one of these weaknesses being that all language was experienced as foreign, and my interpreter was broken. Concrete things I could understand. So if someone said the man is wearing a black coat, I could conjure up a visual image in my mind and I could understand that. But if it became a relationship, I could not understand. So anything like, how could my aunt also be my mother's sister? Like, it made no sense to me. Or something like fractions. I could understand 1 because I could see 1 object. I could understand 4 because I could line up 4 objects. But as soon as you put the 1 over the 4, it became a relationship. And there were no relationships in my world. I just could not understand. I couldn't tell time because I couldn't understand the relationship between the hour hand and the minute hand on a clock. I couldn't understand cause and effect. So I truly didn't understand why people did things. I didn't understand the why of things at all. There was no logic in my world. Things like jokes. I didn't understand irony, so I didn't understand jokes. And I learned to laugh when other people did because I didn't want to feel left out. And I was vulnerable to con artists because one of the ways you know somebody is conning you is you hear the logical inconsistency in what someone's saying. There was no logic in my world, so there were no logical inconsistencies. And I was identified very early as being incredibly rigid. And I was, but it didn't come from an emotional place. It was cognitive, because for me to figure anything out was so hard won. If somebody said, well, think about something in a different way, it actually felt like a physical attack because I'd have to let go of what I'd come to understand to try to integrate the other piece of information. Making decisions was paralyzing. And then I had other problems. I was incredibly accident prone. The left side of my body was an alien being, not connected to the rest of me. I would bang into things. I was constantly bruised on the left side of my body. If I lifted something up with my left hand, I would inevitably drop it. I learned very early that I had to watch the left side of my body because I was truly a danger to myself. And my mother thought for sure that I would be dead by the age of 5 because I was so accident prone. And to this day, I have the physical scars on my body that attest to that learning difficulty. And then I didn't understand 3-dimensional space. I couldn't create maps in my head. So I would get lost. Crossing the street for me was terrifying. I couldn't judge how far away was that car from where I was. And this was my life, struggling to make meaning, doing poorly in school, abysmal in sports, and socially isolated because I did not understand relationships. And I felt incredible shame. Something was deeply, deeply wrong with me. And I tried traditional approaches to support my learning. And these approaches were all about trying to work around the problem. They were not about fixing the source of the problem. And while they provided some minimal relief, it was at the cost of heroic effort and struggle. And the problems persisted. I could memorize, but a friend once pointed out, I never said the words, I understand, because I didn't. In grade 8, I hit the wall. I could see no way forward. How can I go to high school and tackle more difficult material? Ending my life and the struggle seemed the only option. And even that, I couldn't get right. So I woke up the next morning and I soldiered on. What kept me going was an attitude that I learned from my father. So my father said, if there is a problem, and there's no solution in the world, he said, it's our responsibility to go out and create that solution. And he said, if the world says it isn't possible, he said, don't listen. He said, don't be limited by conventional wisdom because this is how science goes forward. So I was driven to find a solution to my problems. And I continued to hunt through studying psychology, trying to first understand what was wrong with me. As I learned from my father, the first step to solving a problem is you have to really understand its basic nature. And then something life-altering happened. I met a mind like my own. Leo Vasasky, a Russian soldier who in World War II suffered a localized head wound. So there was one difference between us. His mind was shaped by a bullet in part of his brain, whereas mine had been this way since birth. And it was on the pages of a book, The Man with the Shattered World, written by the brilliant Russian neuropsychologist who I mentioned earlier, Alexander Romanovich Luria, that I met my counterpart. Vasasky, like me, after his injury, couldn't tell time. I was now 25 years old and I still couldn't tell time. He described his world as living in a fog where meaning disappeared into a mist. I was using exactly the same language in my journal. So now I knew that it was part of my brain in the left hemisphere, the angular gyrus, that was not working. And then I discovered the solution to my problem through the work of Mark Rosenzweig, a psychologist at Berkeley, who showed me a solution. He found by studying rats that if you provided them with stimulation, their brains changed physiologically and functionally, this concept of neuroplasticity. They became better learners. This was neuroplasticity in action. Simply put, the brain can be altered at a physiological and functional level through specific stimulation. So this was the beginning of my work and of my transformation. I knew there were parts of my brain that weren't working, and what I needed to do was find a way to stimulate these parts. And at the time, people said there was no human neuroplasticity, but I remembered what my father said, don't be limited by conventional wisdom. And I figured if neuroplasticity existed in rats, surely it must exist in humans. So I set out to create my first exercise to deal with that problem of understanding relationships. And it was really, really critical because if you think about having no relationships in your world, I didn't understand why people did things. I felt like there was a puppet master somewhere pulling strings, but I had no idea of any of the reasons behind things. So I was incredibly socially isolated. And what I did is I created an exercise using clocks. Not that I necessarily wanted to learn how to tell time, but I wanted to force my brain to process relationships. And how do you do that? But through seeing the relationships. And I started with a two-handed, and then I created a three-handed and a four-handed. And now we have actually a 10-handed clock. And the idea is not, again, as I said, to tell time, but it's to force the brain to process relationships simultaneously, to see interconnections between thoughts and ideas. And over time, as I worked on that exercise, and I was pretty terrible at the beginning, but I got better and better after thousands and thousands of hours. One day I realized something had changed. I picked up a philosophy book and I had been able to read the words in the philosophy book, but I'd never understood the meaning because it's very conceptually dense. I read the page and I could understand it as I was reading it, which had never happened before. And I thought maybe I just picked a really easy book and it was a fluke. So now I pulled another book off, read a page at random and understood it. By the time I was finished, I had 100 books piled up all around me and I'd been able to read and understand each page. And something critical had happened. Also, I could now listen to people's conversations and I could understand what they were saying in real time. Before I lived in what I called lag time. I was like a little tape recorder where I would memorize conversations, walk away, play them over for 2 or 3 hours, try to figure out what somebody had said. But then if I did figure it out, that person hadn't waited around for me to do that, and I couldn't be part of the conversation. For the first time in my life, I was part of human discourse. It was incredibly profound. I could listen to someone, understand them, make an appropriate comment, and have a conversation. So my experiment had worked. My brain had changed. And then I created a different exercise for that part of my brain that left me accident prone. It's the part of the brain that registers sensation. And I knew to work that part of the brain, I had to make really accurate and refined movements with my eyes closed. And so I learned how to draw incredibly complex figures with my eyes shut as accurately as with my eyes open. And the part of the brain that processes sensory information had to work really hard. And now I'm functional on the left side of my body, and I'm no longer a danger to myself. I can play sports, and my car is no longer dented and banged up on the left side, because if I didn't know where the left side of my body was, I didn't know where the left side of that car was. And then the part of my brain that controls spatial navigation, I created a different exercise for that. And now I don't get lost. I can read a map and I can actually build IKEA furniture. So as a result, I changed multiple parts of my brain. I could process relationships, I could navigate in space, and I was no longer uncoordinated. And I felt I'm now living proof of human neuroplasticity, even though the world at that time in 1978 said this was not possible. I wanted to take this work out into the world to help others struggling with learning problems. And I saw a value in developing more and more cognitive exercises for other areas, not necessarily just the ones I had. So think about the person that can't read nonverbal cues, so they struggle in social interactions. I created a problem for that part of the brain. To visual memory functions necessary to learn reading and spelling patterns, I created an exercise for that. To auditory memory functions necessary to remember information, to understanding numbers, time sequences, quantities, the ability to learn motor patterns, which are critical for writing, to executive functioning, critical for thinking, strategizing, and problem solving. And these problems don't end at the classroom door. As one parent so aptly said, school is just a metaphor for life. And I've listened deeply to the people who walk through the door of my program, and I've learned from each and every one. I've learned there's no part of the brain that's unimportant. Each part contributes to some aspect of our functioning in the world. That concept that people say we only use 10% of our brains, that's not true. Over the course of the day, we use every aspect of our brain. And if there's an area of difficulty, it will show itself. I've learned about what I call cognitive mismatches, where there's a mismatch between the demand of a task and the unique cognitive profile of an individual. I worked with an airline pilot who had an auditory memory problem. Imagine, you're flying into Chicago O'Hare and you can't remember the instructions from the air traffic controller. It's a little worrisome. This man had a strategy, this pilot, to get the air traffic controller to repeat the instructions. I worried, what if the air traffic controller is too busy? The solution was to strengthen his auditory memory, which we did. So now he can listen and remember. I worked with a pathologist who was doing his residency in Connecticut. And he had a problem with what I call object recognition. And he was studying tissue, breast tissue, for somebody that had had breast cancer, gone through radiation and chemotherapy. And he knew how important his decision was to determine, is this person in remission? So he looked really, really carefully. And he was about to sign off that the person was when his supervisor came and said, did you not see these cells here? This is cancer. And it wasn't that he hadn't seen them, his brain hadn't recognized what they were. And that's a very specific part of the brain. He exited out of his residency program, worked on this problem, and will not make that kind of mistake again. I worked with a butcher who had that kinesthetic problem, the same difficulty I had. He didn't know where the left side of his body was in space. And his job was hold a really sharp knife in your right hand, and he didn't know where his left hand was. So the first day I met him, his left arm and hand was all wrapped up in bandages because he was cutting himself. And again, he didn't want to switch careers. So we addressed that problem. Now he knows where the left side of the body is. So we hear about this concept of human error. I think sometimes this might be a cognitive mismatch. And I've learned that individuals with learning difficulties don't dare to dream. That's what they tell me. Adults tell me their career was chosen for them. Doors were closed and they had limited doors to choose from. And what I think the work that I've created does, this work of harnessing the brain's changeable nature, has the potential of opening doors and allowing these individuals not only to dream, but to realize their dreams. And this, to me, is the true marriage between neuroscience and education, that school becomes a place we go to work and strengthen our brains, allowing us to efficiently and joyously learn. So what have I learned on this journey? That we all have a seed in us, a kernel of inspiration, the creative spark. And if we run into barriers or limitations, we have the power to see the opportunities in the struggle and to transform this energy into one of possibility and hope. lets each of us in our own unique way free energy to dance with the universe. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much, Barbara. Wow. There was so much there. I'm reading the comments. There's so many. I'm just overwhelmed with how, first of all I'm thinking is happy brain, happy life. Like if we, in the Course in Miracles, we talk about like looking at the blocks to love, and here we're looking at the blocks to understanding. And it's so interesting I can see like the ways that people are already connecting, like, wow, my brain works like that. Wow, my brain works like that. And that's what I loved about your book, is that there was so many ways that there can be almost like would you say like a miswiring to, to information. Anyway, yeah, well, it's interesting to know that we have jurisdiction over this. It's almost like you've given us the awareness that we have jurisdiction over the universe. I wanted to say, like, let's go ahead and bring Barbara Young up again. I was going to say Reverend Barbara Young, Reverend Barbara Arrowsmith-Young, because I feel like it's such a powerful ministry that this woman is bringing forth. And there's no other word for it. It's looking at your work and looking at the relationships that I have with members in my community and with my family. Like I could begin to differentiate the different types of blocks that you spoke about in your book. And so this assessment that you move people through, it's like not every brain is the same. And so how did you come to find which part of the brain you could tell was working or not working in regards to people's experiences? Like, how did you do that work?
Well, I started with myself. It was kind of like some of the work in neuroscience comes out, out of labs, right? This came out of a very naturalistic, humanistic lab, which was me. And then, knowing that something was, whether I don't really like the word wrong, but something wasn't working the way it was designed to work, which was causing me incredible, pain and suffering. And somebody in August of 1977 handed me Lurie's book, The Man with the Shattered World. And it was right around the time that Lurie died, right? He died in August of 1977 in Russia. And so I don't know whether this was a gift from Lurie, but and this was at a point, again, I was contemplating ending my life because I saw no future for myself. I compromised my immune system, which is a piece of the research, shows that individuals with learning difficulties often have compromised immune systems, probably for lots of different reasons. And so this was a gift from the universe, this book, because as I read it, this man in Russia was living my life, this Russian soldier, because the book told the story of Vasasky through his journals after he had his wound, and then Lurie explaining what was going on in his brain. And this was my aha moment. Like this was me. He could have been writing about me. So because it was very personal, I think, and I had my own experience, I could play the research through my own experience. And I also think, we all have our unique gifts. And I read a book once about Jonas Salk, who discovered the polio vaccine. And he said he became the immune system to discover the vaccine. And I got shivers when I read that, because I didn't tell anybody at that time, because I thought they'd think this was like really out there. But I would become that part of the brain. Like I would think my way into, and it isn't even thinking, I would sense my way into that part of the brain to understand, again, through Lurie's writing, what does it do and what does it need to enhance it, to improve it, to build it if there's a difficulty there. And that's the only way I can describe it. I mean, I write poetry, and when I write poetry, I become that drop of dew, not in an intellectual level, but I feel it. I feel its viscosity. It's maybe like music. There's a different, to me, I had gifts in my right hemisphere that I couldn't articulate in language because that part of my brain wasn't working. And I used those gifts to help me find my way through the areas of difficulty. And so it was just a really it feels like I was destined to do this because it was my unique combination of strengths and difficulties. And then, who my mother was, and who my father was. Like it was that beautiful mix of nature and nurture, and grit. I mean, we probably all know Angela Duckworth's work of grit. I probably could have been the poster child, starting in grade 1 for grit. So yeah, I think and then I when I saw the benefit, I thought I can't just keep this for myself. I have to take it out into the world, to help others that are struggling in not just the same ways, but different ways. And then I would have conversations with people and try to explore their difficulties, then go back into Luria's work, come back with little experiments, some of them that ended up in the garbage pail because they didn't work. But over time, developed we have programs for 19 different cognitive functions. We now have research actually imaging the changes in brains as students go through this work. And we see reduction in cortisol, as Linda mentioned at the beginning. Like, this is not like our brain mediates our experience in the world. So it affects our personality, it affects everything, right? So there's not only improvement in cognition, but the person feels that they can engage. I mean, the World Health Organization's definition of mental health is, a person that can fully participate and engage in the world. And this allows people to do that.
Yeah.
So I'm passionate about it.
Yeah, I can tell. And it's so great to see that. And I love that this book arrived for you and that it does feel so preordained. And how many times I'm sure people who are listening in have had their own moment of struggling with something, and then a book fall out of the bookshelf, or a book arrive, or something shows up where you're like, oh, like the universe is supporting us and moving forward. So that part of your story is just so beautiful. We have some questions in the chat about, and I'm sure many people might relate to this as well, is that one mom says, like, I wish I had known this before I had medicated my children with for maybe it was Adderall or ADHD. And do you want to speak to that at all? First of all, in our community, we believe that God is in the pill and the prayer and the procedure and the process, and that all of these things work together. But what have you found in regards to people who have remorse over going that avenue?
Yeah. I would say let it go, forgive yourself. I mean, we all do the best we can with the knowledge that we have, right? And so absolutely, we work with students that are on medication. I would say by the end of the program, about 75% of them are able to come off the medication because the brain is now working to regulate attention. And again, I talk about it in detail in my book. Like, attention is very complex. It's not just one cognitive function. And there is a small percentage of individuals that the work that I do won't benefit. It's a very small percentage because it's subcortical, and those are the ones that are going to need medication. So I think it's, we all go out and do the best we can with the toolkit we have, and then we learn some more information, and that becomes part of the next aspect of our toolkit. And yes.
That's great advice. Don't use it to harm yourself, and that it all can be helpful. Oh, and what a huge statistic to be able to get people off medicine and having them, assisting their own healing. That's beautiful. Beth Gordon has a question for you.
Yeah, I do. Hi, Barbara. Thank you so much for sharing this. I find the whole thing incredibly fascinating. And one of the things that really struck me was having something right in front of you and knowing, like, I can't discern between these two things. When you talked about being prey to scam artists because you couldn't tell the difference between, like, their words and their actions and making that association. And, there's so many different ways in which a brain that's functioning optimally, so many different things that it does. And you've got all these different assessments. And I'm just wondering, like, where would someone start if they thought, like, well, maybe I have something, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
We have
a questionnaire, a free questionnaire on our website that I developed. So I would go ahead and out that questionnaire, and based on your responses, it'll provide a report saying it looks like you identified these areas, and then it'll give you more information about those areas and do they fit. So that's the first step. We're also doing a 5-part webinar series. I think I sent Joni the link. It starts, I believe, this Wednesday. I'm not doing it, some of my staff are, but again, it's kind of a journey into the world of the brain to get to know your brain. So that also could be interesting for people. But the questionnaire is a good first start. There's a lot of material on our website describing these different cognitive functions. My book, each chapter, it's The Woman Who Changed Her Brain. Each chapter is a different cognitive function, and you can get that on Amazon. So those are all ways to start going into the exploration. And then for each of those, we have programs, to strengthen. And whether it's an area, obviously the students with learning difficulties tend to have, more significant expression or more of a combination of difficulties. But I have never met a human being yet that doesn't have something to say, oh, I wish, I could be stronger on this. I worked with a retired professor from medicine at the University of Toronto, and she hadn't been able to do face recognition, right? She didn't recognize people, and that had always bothered her. It hadn't interfered with her work. So at 74, she came in and worked on that, made the same progress as a 15-year-old, and now, she can recognize people on the street at parties, which has, made her a little happier in her retirement.
That's beautiful.
I had one other question too, which is, when people have experienced, the consequences of not understanding, whether it is alienating people or making choices or decisions that ultimately they didn't really understand what they were deciding because their brain wasn't functioning optimally for them. Do you have anything part of your program or that you suggest for people navigating those experiences of, I didn't know how to recognize that. I didn't understand. I got scammed by the scam artist or whatever it was.
You mean after they've improved that function? Yeah, we recommend, we certainly do lots of conversations and lots of education, but often some sort of therapeutic or counseling support to help the person forgive themselves, basically. That was their cognitive understanding of the world, right? And have compassion for themselves, that they did the best they could with their profile. So yes.
Thank you. Then thanks for doing this work in the world. It seems really amazing and like a whole new frontier. And I love what you said, free energy so you can dance with the universe. I just love that.
You can take it.
What is your question or your addition, Esmeralda?
I have a question. I had a traumatic brain injury about in my early 20s. It's been like 24 years. And I've done this work pretty much on my own, trying to test out different theories. And I have been able to learn things. But my question is there a point where you can regress? Like, do you constantly have to keep training your brain? Or is this something where if you do tend to I started noticing that words don't come easily anymore. And I know that part of my brain was severely impacted. Is it something that easily comes back, or do you have to just continuously do the work?
Really great question. What we find is, no, you don't have to continuously do the work, because your brain starts to do the work on its own, right? If you think about neural networks or functional systems, where anytime we do anything, multiple regions of our brain come together to carry out that task. And if there's been a weakness, it's a drag on that network. Like, it slows it down, makes it more efficient. Once that region has been stimulated and strengthened, it starts to work efficiently within the neural network and get its own stimulation ongoing by engaging in that neural network. So we've tracked people 30 and 40 years out of the program, and there's no drop off of function. Now, there is, cognitive decline with aging, which is is separate from this. So that can happen, but then the person can come back in and work on, we've got an exercise that's quite effective for that, and kind of stave off that cognitive decline with aging. But no, we don't see a drop off of function.
Great, thank you.
Well, I just want Barbara to share with the audience here where her programs are. She has a school in Toronto, but if people are in the US, how can they access? Do they access the questionnaire? Do you have schools in the States? And I know you have programs in schools in Australia, and you're heading out to Australia in a few months. So perhaps you can share that.
The good news, like one of the there's opportunity in crisis. The opportunity in COVID for our organization, one of them was within 3 weeks, we went online completely, right? Because schools around the world shut their doors physically, and we had students in the program. So we now have online programs. So it doesn't matter where somebody lives, if there is no physical location close to them, they can access this in virtual classrooms online. So they're run with a teacher or facilitator. And to me, that's really, really exciting, because there are lots of individuals in need that aren't close to a location. But there are schools in the US and India, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Thailand. We're just going into Tasmania. We're working with Teen Challenge, which deals with people with addiction, which is really exciting, because I've long felt the work could benefit. And we've had a year pilot showing the benefits of the rewiring of the brain for individuals with addiction. So yes.
Good. Thank you, Barbara.
That is amazing. I love that your talk included harnessing the brain's changeable nature, which what a frontier, and what an incredible thing to recognize that we have power over. So it feels like a brain gym. Who shouldn't be at the brain gym? We should all be at the brain gym.
What a treasure trove this has been. Thank you so much, Barbara Arrowsmith-Young. I am so elated to be here. I am a multiple traumatic brain injury survivor. My first injury happened at the age of 3. The last, I was 20 years old. That was over 30 years ago. And I've been really struggling. I've been a medical anomaly most of my life, very high functioning. No one would ever be able to look at me and tell that I struggle as I do, functionally, cognitively. And as a result, I have basically been atrophying on the vines of life, so to speak, just attempting to white knuckle my way through my daily existence, just trying to function. And it's very difficult. I often say all one needs to do is come home with me and see how I'm struggling in my home. You can't see it in a clinical setting. I can't replicate that for clinicians. And I've been to so many different specialists, providers, facilities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. However, I'm continually, how would I even call it? Because I also struggle with aphasia, as Merelda had mentioned something. So I had expressive and receptive aphasia that I've really almost single-handedly rehabbed myself around, because I continued to fall through the cracks, and I'm continually, can't think of the word, but not identified as someone who fits the metrics of what a program offering would green light a participant for. And so therefore, I'm not sure where to turn. And I was wondering, and some of the questions that I had were already asked and answered. So thank you for that. So I'm assuming and making the presumption basically that this is a proprietary methodology that you're offering. And my question was, I live in the States. I would imagine this would be self-pay, and that's another question that may not be appropriate for this forum. However, I would not be able to travel extensively for treatment. However, I'm glad to hear that you all are offering virtual, I guess, cognitive rehabilitation, remediation. What do you call it if there's a catchphrase? Cognitive repatterning?
That's really good. I mean, it's cognitive enhancement. I don't have a good term. I struggle with that, but yeah.
For someone in my position, I'm in my 50s, biomechanical injury standpoint and rehabbing that, do you feel that this is something that even your program can assist me with.
I think it could be absolutely a benefit. And I don't know whether, I think people, Joni, Maureen, have my email address, and there may be some people that I could send you to. We're just, starting to fund a research study at Brigham Women's and Harvard with one of my exercises in traumatic brain injury. So yes, I'd be happy to continue this discussion offline and see whether there's something that we could co-create to benefit you.
And may I say also in parting, I really appreciate you sharing with us the magnificent wisdom and the intestinal fortitude that your father had and has. I don't know if he's still here in the body. However, I took that as a charge that I will be borrowing going forward also. And that's been my philosophy as well. If there is no path, create one,
Yeah.
Yes.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
So thank you so
Yeah.
much. I gained great strength from that. Thank you.
Thank you, Allie. Thanks for joining the conversation.
Mhm.
It's funny, Allie, because this whole church was based on that philosophy. I'm like, there's no church that honors the Divine Mother. Need to make one.
That's right. Why not?
Oh, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Barbara, for being here and for sharing. You're just a marvel, and I just have a specific question, and actually I have two. Does neuroplasticity show promise for the aging brain, especially like preventing dementia or Alzheimer's, or helping people who have already been diagnosed in that area?
Yeah, definitely. There's this whole concept of cognitive reserve in the field of neuroscience, which means, like you've kind of just built up extra muscles in your brain, so that, there's nothing that we understand at all that's going to present or prevent if one is genetically predisposed to get Alzheimer's or dementia, and that's part of their path. We don't understand enough to know that we can stop that process, but this kind of work can slow the process or build that cognitive reserve. So maybe it's going to be 4 additional good years of cognitive resources and functioning before the symptoms take hold. And there's all the research suggesting, the more we keep our brain active and fit, possibly it may be neuropreventative, but we don't know enough yet. So I never want to make a claim that we don't have the science for yet.
Thank you. And the other question is in your measurement of how this has been working cognitively, where would you say the most benefit has arisen, like in people with ADHD or autism spectrum? Where have you had a measure of that success?
The broad range of students with learning difficulties. So that can be dyslexia, dysgraphia, which is basically struggle writing, nonverbal learning difficulties. So the person that can't read social cues, auditory memory difficulties, visual memory difficulties, executive functioning, reasoning, working memory. So the whole big range, and attentional difficulties. And then there's a spillover in social emotional well-being. We've used some of Carol Dweck's measures out of Stanford. Open mindset. Students in this program develop a growth mindset. And you can't be in a program that's driving neuroplastic change in your own brain without developing a growth mindset. Right. So
thank you very much.
Thank you, Deb. Thanks for being here. And our next question is from Betty. Hi, welcome back, Betty.
I asked this question as an educator, one who was not particularly fond of being relegated to online learning. So, and online teaching, online learning. And I'm not fully convinced, because I still argue there's nothing like face-to-face. There's nothing like face-to-face interaction. Have you have you considered or had a chance to look at the research, the differences between progress in neural relationships and neural integration in a face-to-face environment versus an online environment? That's not to say that this program is not very helpful to me emotionally and spiritually, but there's still nothing like the face-to-face.
Yeah, it's really, I'm a big data geek, right? Like, my whole school in Toronto is a laboratory school, and I trial things there before I put them out into the world. So absolutely, as soon as, we went online and there was all the conversation around it's not as effective. And I understand in terms of regular education, absolutely. But our programs are very different. This is not like, a kind of imparting of knowledge. These are cognitive exercises. So we looked at our data in 2019, which is when we were all in person, and our data in 2020 and 2021, where we were mostly online. And what we found, exactly the same progress. And we looked at all sorts of different kinds of measures because it's not traditional education. Like we're working the brain, and we've built in all sorts of feedback, and we're doing it though in a virtual classroom. So there is a teacher there, and there are students. So it's not playing on your phone with a cognitive exercise. There is a human being. I mean, is it the same as being in a classroom with those students? But some students actually are doing better because Johnny isn't sitting beside them poking them and distracting them as they're trying to do the cognitive exercise.
Damn, Johnny.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sorry, I should have picked a female name, not a male name.
No, it's good. No, it's fine.
Yeah, but yes, so we've absolutely, because I had that same question, right? And for our work, we're seeing the same results, which then makes me feel confident that we can offer this around the world in both formats.
Yes, thank you. I perhaps just want to say before you leave, then I'm not asking that in terms of a traditional classroom. I also teach in a program where it's highly interactive, it's highly interpersonal, sharing and so forth. And when we're face to face, it seems to work much more effectively in a non-traditional approach to teaching and learning as well. And it's more about all of us being learners, teachers and the students in that particular process. So that is a non-traditional approach. So I'm not trying to disprove as much as collect information about the differences in the content. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Betty. Thanks for your question. We have a few more questions.
My question though was about a best friend of mine who happens to be going through a lot of physical issues, and she can't seem to stop smoking. And she mentioned recently the patch doesn't work, and she said that someone told her about hypnotic, and I'm like, try anything, because she's the fact is she hates it. She tells me, and I'm looking at her, we're talking FaceTime, and she's telling me how much she hates these things, but she can't put them down. And I know that a lot of it has to do with she's in the pain. She's in a lot of pain. I can't explain all the different things. She's got high blood pressure. She's got so much going on, and the care that she's not receiving, although she qualifies. She's in New York and she's having a hard time. And I just want to know, is there something in the brain that's I guess it's an addiction. That's something we didn't really necessarily touch into, but hypnotism, I would think, should help her. Anything that anyone knows, because to hate something and to do it, that just baffles me.
Right. And Barbara was saying that they're currently working with addiction. One addiction probably is every addiction. Did you want to share on that, Barbara?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, these are individuals, yes, that are in a treatment program actually in Australia, and they've come into the treatment program because of fairly significant addiction. And what we're finding, I mean, we know there's a really, really good book called Biology of Desire. I'm trying to think of the neuroscientist that wrote it, but it's a reframing of addiction. And addiction rewires the brain. And he was a neuroscientist who was also an addict, right? So he writes from that perspective. So it's a fascinating exploration, and there's some good advice and information in that book. And he's an expert, so I just hesitate to say too much here. I mean, what we're finding with my group, or the group that's doing this, is the brain is starting because addiction definitely rewires the brain, and it kind of shuts out the prefrontal cortex, which is that, the kind of objective thinking, judgment part of the brain. And so, yes, your friend can hate it, but that part that's kind of regulating has been rewired and isn't strong enough to break the cycle. So there are lots of good programs out there to address addiction, and hypnosis has been used successfully. But yeah, I would look at Biology of Desire is the book.
Biology of
Biology of Desire.
Biology
of Desire.
of Desire.
But there are good programs out there to address addiction beyond, like my work is very much in the experimental stage to look at addiction.
Thank you so much for that. Wow, what a powerful frontier. We have Martina from Ireland who has a question for you.
Hi, thank you. Barbara, just, there's no words. Thank you so much. Phenomenal work you do, and the inspiration. Anyway, I wouldn't do it any justice, so God bless, your work is profound. But what struck me, well, so many things did. But when you were mentioning that you went into a sensory experience of going into that part of the brain, and you mentioned the man who was at the polio vaccine, he became the immune system to create the vaccine, and that I had this strong sense of, and I'm asking, is it like you actually went in and sensed that area of the brain and got to know it so well that it was like that area of the brain was telling you what it needs? And what I'm really struck by is that you came out from that then, and rather than doing what maybe a lot of people do, and I would be one of them, is then tell people what you've discovered, which is so amazing, and this is what the brain needs, which would be kind of a learning, tell people what they need to know. Instead, you crafted an experiential doing that feeds what the brain needs. It's like a wave has hit me. I'm just blown away by that whole capacity that you have to be able to come out and then craft something that it sounds like it's not like a learning. You're teaching people how to know what to do, and then they, through the doing, will have the experiential shift and change, because the brain will show them, hey, I'm responding to what you're doing. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it is really, I find it really hard to articulate. There's a book, Ian McGilchrist. He wrote the book, The Master and His Emissary. And
I have a brilliant
you've
book.
Got it. Yes, isn't it brilliant?
Book.
He's brilliant, and we've had several conversations, and he's showing the divide between the right and left hemisphere, right? And that our right hemisphere, often, which is where we have probably our religious experience and our connection to the divine, isn't valued in our culture, right? And because it doesn't have language, right? And for a long time, because of that, they thought that, the right hemisphere didn't do anything. Well, we wouldn't have half of our brain that didn't do anything, but because it doesn't have a language, it's hard to articulate. And I still struggle to today to explain that experience. But I think probably musicians or poets, like people that is a felt visceral experience. Like I became that part of the brain. Like all I know is I became that thing. Like it wasn't an intellectual thing of me sitting out here observing it. I became it. And in the becoming of it, it informed me of what it needed. Like and that doesn't even do it justice, right? I don't know how to articulate it. And then through that then I started to create the exercises that then do for people what that part of the brain needs to strengthen it, right? And that's what our research is showing, that yes, the outcome is, we're seeing strength and connectivity in the salience network, the executive control network, the default mode network, as people go through this. but it was at that very experiential level. And that's why I feel like this is what I came to Earth to do, because it was like everything, even if I fought against it, everything conspired to bring me to this work, right?
Yeah. It strikes me that it's sensory as well,
Yes.
Barbara. You know, it in a world like it's a cognitive map and a cognitive functionality, and most people would think of cognition as, well, I'll go off and think about that. But it's like you've brought in the sensory aspect of our beingness, which is lost in modern times in so many ways.
Exactly. And that's what Ian McGilchrist tried to, argue. And there's a documentary by someone that I know here in Toronto that did On the Divided Brain, if people are interested. It's fascinating about his work, but I believe it's called The Divided Brain.
Well, thank you for that question. Thank you for the answer. It's beautiful. It just makes me think, like, when we are in our inspiration, we need no language, but we understand even despite that. It's great. What a beautiful door you've opened for all of us today. And thank you so much for all the incredible resources that you brought along with it. We hope that you'll come back because we have so much more to speak about. But we'll do our part by engaging with you and filling out those assessments, and maybe even having a salon here where we do this brain play. I want to say brain work, but brain gym. We're going to have a song from Michelle again, and then we'll pray out. But I just wanted to say thank you so much again for opening up this conversation. I know it's just the beginning. Yeah.
Hi. So I'm just going to recite a poem, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
It's by an Irish poet called John O'Donoghue, from his book Benedictus. And the poem is titled For a New Beginning. In out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the grey promises that sameness whispered, heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered would you always live like this. Then the delight when your courage kindled and out you stepped onto new ground, your eyes young again with energy and dream, a path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure, hold nothing back, learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will be home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. That was so exquisite, and it was the perfect ending to this incredible conversation. You intuitive goddess of brilliance. Thank you so much for sharing all that you are with this community. And I too hope that you'll be back as well. And just so grateful that you came today, and Mia Sarah for making these wonderful connections, and Linda Vasasky for making these wonderful connections. And we're just so grateful to each and every member of our community and the way that we are continuing to grow and bloom here. So thank you, everyone. Have a gorgeous week. And we just give thanks for the continuation of this conversation. God bless. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. So beautiful.
So beautiful.
Wow, this was wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Michelle, we need to get a copy of that poem and maybe read it every single day for breakfast.
I agree.
No problem. I can share it with you, no problem.
But I think in your voice was really the necessary ingredient as well. I'm gonna clip out just that piece and put it on its own YouTube so that we can just re-listen to that poem over and over again. It was so
I'm going to do that, Maureen.
I will.
Thank you, Michelle. So beautiful. Thank you.
No
And
problem.
before Barbara Young comes back again, please go pick up her book. I'm listening to it on Audible. It's so wonderful. I mean, just check out her resources and pick up her book, and so that we can even have another easier conversation with her as she comes back. God bless. Bye.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey.
Bye.
Okay, would you like me to end this?
Sure.
We're finished. Okay, great. Everybody have a nice day. May the course be with you.
So good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to those of you watching in Ireland. I am absolutely thrilled to be introducing you to today's musician. So she's Michelle Brady. She hails from County Longford in Ireland, but she's now living in County Carlow. And she has been playing music since she was a young child, taking music lessons, I think from about the age of 7, if I'm correct. And she has a great fondness for Irish tradition and music, and really, got to share this talent with a beautiful man who passed away a couple of years ago, but he really brought out the gift in her of Irish music. They shared many evenings together, a neighbor of hers, and I know he is watching her as she plays here this morning, this performance. Michelle is part of the Irish ACIM group, and she was one of the first ones to join us, and she absolutely loves nature, and she's also taken part in the affirmative prayer and does the most beautiful affirmative prayer that I have heard in terms of how she brings nature into it. It's always just so exquisite. She talks about God being the whisper in the wind, and yeah, she's just really lyrical and beautiful, and I'm just thrilled that she's playing here today. So without further ado, I hand you Michelle Brady.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Mia. That was such a wonderful introduction, and it's wonderful you should mention Frank. It's actually his anniversary this weekend, so yeah, it's kind of perfect. I'm getting this opportunity to play and remember him at the same time. So I'm going to play a slow air on the low whistle. It's a tune I learned many years ago. I can't actually remember the name, and I can't find the notes anywhere. But the melody has just stayed with me, so I hope you all enjoy it. So.
Thank you so much. That was the perfect tone for this conversation, I think. So I really appreciate that. Thank you, Mia. Thank you, Michelle.